dreaming of a holiday. This is what it can look like when everything goes well. This was a photograph of my family and I on holiday in Lanzarote a few years ago. And as you'll see from the picture, you can see that I'm sitting on my scooter, but still managing to enjoy a really lovely family holiday. I have many years lived experience of travelling with Pompe disease. I was diagnosed in 2002 and I also started night ventilation in 2003. ERT kicked in 2006 and I also now use my ventilator for a few hours in the daytime. However, I try not to let that stop me getting out and about. And as I say, this was a holiday before COVID restrictions kicked in and before we were in lockdown. What you don't see in the photograph is that back in the hotel room, there's my ventilator, my cough assist machine, walking frame, and they're all back at the apartment. We also have an accessible apartment with wet room and also a bed that has bed raisers on it as well. So let it begin. Planning a holiday can be quite daunting because there is so much to think about. Particularly when you've got a disability, you might need to think more about travelling with a wheelchair, travelling in your scooter, taking medical equipment with you. But if you try and prepare and plan as much as you can, then you will find that although things can go wrong and will go wrong, they're less likely to go wrong if you have done your research. So fail to plan, plan to fail. You also need to think carefully about the accommodation that you're going to stay in. Will it be a hotel, an apartment, or possibly a villa? And also the resort. It's all very well maybe thinking, well, we have an accessible hotel, but you need to think about the location of the resort. And is the resort accessible? Does it have sort of like promenades where you can get your wheelchair and scooter easily to get around and about? Are you on a hill? Because again, if you are, that is very difficult when you're in a wheelchair and a scooter. Think about the battery power that it will actually use up when you're out and about. Research what you need to do if you're travelling either by plane or boat, and also if you're taking your car abroad. There's lots of things to remember if you're doing each of these modes of transport, and we'll cover this further on in the presentation. Do remember to take out travel insurance. Lots of people go on holiday that don't even consider taking travel insurance, but as we know, even for people without disabilities, you can become unwell on holiday, you can have an accident, and if you're not covered, then costs can be extremely high, and healthcare costs abroad can be very high, and so can repatriation costs back to the UK. It's also important to ensure any mobility equipment that you might use, be that a wheelchair or mobility scooter, so that if anything crops up while you're abroad, that you are insured. Remember also that if you use a ventilator and or cough assist machine, that you take any leads and adapters with you to make sure that your equipment will work when you're on your holiday. And finally, remembering also that if you have a Pompe card or a card for your ventilator, and if any of you have medical alert bracelets, these are really good to flag up any conditions that you may have. Mine, for example, says I have Pompe disease. It tells them that I use a ventilator, and I also have a sensitivity to a drug in an anaesthetic. So all that information is on a bracelet that I wear, and paramedics and hospital crew know that they need to check a patient for any medical bracelets or necklaces when they're treating a patient who is involved in an accident. So this gives you peace of mind that you know that you will be looked after and that people will respect and try and understand your medical condition. Holiday accommodation. There's lots to think about when you're booking accommodation to make sure that it is accessible as possible and suits your needs. So always explain exactly what it is you need, and remember that what is accessible to one person might not be accessible to another person. Don't be afraid to ask for photographs of the apartment or room that you're staying in, of the bathroom or the bedroom. It's important that it can meet your needs, and that if, for example, you need plenty of room to manoeuvre your wheelchair or scooter, that you can see that you have enough room by asking for a photograph. It might be, for example, that you need a wet room, you need grab rails, you need a toilet razor, and again, by asking for photographs, this confirms whether or not this particular property will have them. Please be aware, though, that different countries regard different levels of accessibility as accessible, a bit like in the UK. So, for example, somebody might say, oh yes, we are accessible. We have a ramp to get in and we have a large bathroom. So the large bathroom, in inverted commas, might only have grab rails. It might not have drop-down rails. It might not have an accessible sink. So you need to really be very careful as to what it is you need and whether these particular hotels, villas or apartments can actually meet your needs. Also research the surrounding area where you're staying, because sometimes you might find that you've got an accessible hotel, but actually outside you may be on a hill, or in which case your your scooter or your wheelchair may use a huge amount of battery. So, before you've gone very far, you realise you've used up most of your battery power. So it's very important to make sure that not only is the hotel accessible, but the surrounding area is as well. Consider whether you might need to hire equipment when you're on holiday. For example, you might need to hire bed raisers to make the bed a bit higher. You might need a portable hoist. You may even need a profiling bed. Shower chairs and toilet seat raisers are more commonly available, and there is often an opportunity at your holiday destination to hire a scooter and or a wheelchair, and walking frames as well. So always remember to ask for a quote, and if you can, book in advance, because sometimes when you go to these places, you do find sometimes they exploit you and they do charge a lot of money. So in terms of checking out what it is you're going to be needing when you're at the accommodation, whether that is a hotel or whether it's an apartment, if you are in a hotel, things like automatic doors make life much easier for somebody with a disability. To make sure that there's enough turning space, whether you're in a scooter or a wheelchair, and that's not necessarily just the bedroom, but it could be the hotel area, the lobby, around the pool, etc., etc. Some people may need a portable hoist, and again, you could ask if this is available to hire. If you're staying in a hotel and there are leisure facilities, to make sure that you can actually access those facilities if you need to. And then you could also ask them if they have an extension lead for medical equipment. Again, I would encourage you to take it with you, but if you forget it, you might find that the hotel actually has one that you can borrow. Adapters suitable for use at your destination, so whether that's Europe, whether that's America. And if you're going to a non-English speaking country, it's also worth finding out keywords in the local language for things like wheelchair, scooter, ramp, so that you can try and explain if things go wrong, exactly what it is you need. And for equipment hire, there's a company that's online, www.mobilityequipmenthiredirect.com, and they will be able to give you information about what you can hire. So continuing with the accommodation checklists, ground floor rooms and lifts to all floors. I'll tell you a funny story. We went to France very many years ago, and we were driving down to the Loire Valley, and on the way we stopped at a hotel. My husband had said, "Yeah, we've got a room. The hotel's got a lift, but we're on the 5th floor, but that's fine." And at that point, I was able to walk a little bit, but they did have a lift. So we got into the lift, and the lift took us to the 4th floor. but it didn't take us to the 5th floor where we were staying. So there were quite some steep stairs, so my husband had to help me, literally carry me up the stairs to get to the bedroom. And that was very, very tiring. But it's bizarre that the accessible bedroom was on the 5th floor, but actually the lift only went to the 4th floor. So again, it's very important that you do just check all these things out so that your hotel and holiday doesn't become a bit disastrous. Sometimes also, particularly in the UK, you can get adjacent carers rooms free. Now, I'm not sure about all countries, but it's certainly worth asking. And I think you might find in America actually that would be the case. But it's always worth asking, A, if they have them, and B, is this free? Wet room. Now, for many people, a wet room is essential. And for some people, so is a seat. Sometimes the seats are fixed onto the wall in a wet room. Other times they just push in a shower chair. Grab rails for many people are needed. And of course a non-slip floor or a particularly safety mat so that you don't slip. Many people also need accessible toilets with drop-down rails, which helps make it easier to get on and off the toilet. Disabled parking spaces. If you are driving or hiring a car when you're abroad, then it's important that you can park as close as you can to the hotel or to your apartment. If you're in a hotel, to make sure the dining area is accessible. And then, as I said before, if you need a profiling bed or you need bed raisers, then that's worth thinking about too. And also the evacuation procedure in case of an emergency. It's worth sort of finding out what that is when you get there. And then wider doorways, which again makes it easier for you to get around. Travelling by plane before you book. Travelling by plane can be quite tricky, and the Queen Elizabeth Foundation for Disabled People, the QEF, have actually established a try before you fly. So it aims to give people with disabilities and medical conditions the information that they need to be confident about flying. There's free information on the website and an individual assessment service in what they call a realistic aircraft setting. So you will be seen by trained OTs and they will be able to answer your questions. The most common being, how do I board the aircraft? Can I take my wheelchair? And how do I get to the toilet? So the Queen Elizabeth Foundation's Try Before You Fly service is available at 3 mobility centres throughout the UK. One is in Surrey, another in Leeds, and at the RDAC in Birmingham. So you can go to any of these places and ask for an assessment. In terms of rights for disabled people when flying, so under European law, if you are disabled or you have difficulty moving around, you can receive assistance when you fly to and from and within Europe. This may include help when travelling through an airport, boarding or disembarking an aircraft, and also during a flight. Medical equipment. Medical equipment, you can take 2 pieces of medical equipment free of charge onto the aircraft, and this does not count towards your baggage allowance. It is in addition to hand luggage. But when you do take medical equipment with you, be prepared to take the equipment out of the bag when going through security. For example, your ventilator, you might have to take it all out and pull it all apart so that security can see that there's nothing untowards there and it's safe to take through security. Remember though to make sure you label all your equipment, because quite a few people do travel with medical equipment, and if someone else has a ventilator in the same type of bag as yours, it's easily mixed up. Seats on the aircraft. At the time of booking your holiday and your flights, as a disabled passenger, you have a legal right to sit in an aisle seat, even though the airlines will try and put you in a middle seat. This is because you cannot block the seat of somebody who is not in your party. So if, for example, my husband and I were travelling together and we were sat together in an aisle seat in the middle seat, we could legally sit in that position. However, if there was another member of another family in the window seat, I would not be allowed to sit in the aisle seat because I wouldn't be able to move quick enough in an emergency, so I would therefore impair his exit from the aircraft. So you have to be quite careful, but you do have a right to sit in an aisle seat. As a disabled passenger, the travel companion is allowed to travel with you, and airlines will charge you for choosing where you want to sit on an aircraft and for seats with extra legroom. A tip really is if you find the aircraft seats a bit low, you can always take a cushion with you, and always book passenger assistance in advance, either with the airport if you're doing an independent travel, or if you're doing it with a tour operator, then do it through the tour operator. It can also be useful to have a seating plan of the plane before you book your seats, so that you ensure you're near to toilets and close to the entrance to the aircraft. Some airlines actually have medical seats, and they are reserved for people with disabilities, whether you're a wheelchair user or you have reduced mobility, and they're close to the toilets and close to the entrance of the aircraft. And if you need an aisle chair, it's always good to register this with the special assistance desk at the airport. Travelling with your scooter. So when booking your flights, it's really important to tell the airline that you'll be travelling in your scooter, and they will need the dimensions, the make, the model, and the weight of the scooter. And the batteries on a scooter must be dry cell, because airlines will not carry scooters with acid batteries. Also remember to label your scooter. And if you're travelling with your wheelchair, again, important at the time of booking to tell the airline that you're going to be travelling with your wheelchair. And if you need to get out of your wheelchair when you get to the aircraft door, to let them know if you need to transfer to an aisle chair in order to get to your seat. Again, remember to label your wheelchair. And if you're travelling with your ventilator and your cough assist machine, again, remember that medical equipment, such as ventilators and cough assist machines, must be carried as hand luggage. They mustn't go in with a suitcase on check-in. They have to be carried as hand luggage, even if you have no intention of using your ventilator on board the flight. You can place your ventilator or cough assist machine in the overhead locker, and it is advisable to take a letter from your consultant confirming all this and indicating whether you do intend to use your ventilator on board during the flight. It's important to ensure that your batteries on your ventilator are fully charged. Ventilators can be used once you're airborne, but they are not allowed to be used during takeoff and landing. Be aware also that passengers may stare at you, because for them it's something they probably haven't seen before. So sometimes you've got to put on a brave face and think, well, I'm on my holiday, this is helping me, and you know what, if people stare, well, it's not the end of the world. And finally, do you need oxygen when you're flying? Well, if you do use ventilation, it's advisable to go to your respiratory team and do what they call a fit to fly assessment. This assessment will determine whether or not you will need oxygen on your flight. If you do need oxygen, then this can be bought either via the airline, or you can buy it independently and take it on board with you. But if you buy it through the airline will have it ready for you once you are boarding. So when you sit in your seat, they will give it to you as soon as the aircraft is taken off. But do remember, the cost of oxygen can vary between airlines, and depending on your flight, the length of your flight, you may need more than one canister of oxygen to get you through the flight time. For example, in Europe, I think it gives you about 5 hours of oxygen on one tank. So obviously any flights over and above that would incur a greater charge for a second canister of oxygen. And I think last time I flew and needed oxygen, it was about £100 each way, but that was Europe, that was Spain, and that was the Canaries. So if you were going to America, for example, you'd need 4 lots of oxygen, you'd need 2 each way. So it does add up, the cost does add up. But again, if it means the difference between going on holiday and not going on holiday, then you just need to be aware of the costs. Booking your holiday. So should I book directly or via a travel agent? Well, this really generally depends on personal preference. Many people with disabilities choose to book via a travel agent as they feel it gives them peace of mind. And agents that specialise in holidays for disabled people will actually book seats on the aircraft for you. They can book your scooter and wheelchair onto the aircraft. They can arrange assistance for you at the airport. Also, they can arrange accessible transfers from the airport to your hotel. And they can also answer any queries in advance of you booking your holiday. It might be cheaper to book everything separately, but actually for that little bit of extra money, you're gaining peace of mind knowing that everything has been arranged for you. Also, some companies, such as Disabled Access Holidays, will actually guarantee adapted rooms. So once you've confirmed your booking, an adapted room is guaranteed. But do remember to shop around, as quotes can vary. What about booking online, for example through booking.com? Well, booking.com can offer cheap prices, but please do be aware that accommodation is not checked. They are not regulated, so nothing is protected. You could actually find that when you get to your hotel, your room has been double booked. Specialist travel agents. Specialist travel agents offer accessible holidays and they can help plan the right holiday for you. But again, I would recommend getting a few quotes because prices really can vary from agent to agent. Some examples of companies that specialise in disabled holidays include Disabled Access Holidays, which is www.disabledaccessholidays.com, Limitless Travel, www.limitlesstravel.org, Enable Holidays, www.enableholidays.com, Can Be Done, www.canbedone.co.uk, Access at Last, www.accessatlast.com, and finally www.hazetravel.co.uk. So again, if you go onto Google and have a good search, you can find a list of several companies that specialise in disabled holidays. When you're away and you need to hire equipment, a company called Mobility Equipment Hire Direct, www.mobilityequipmenthiredirect.com. EHIT card. This is the European Health Insurance Card, and many people had this prior to Brexit. The question now is my card still valid? Well, the answer is yes. Your EHIT card is still valid after Brexit, and you can carry on using it until it expires, and the expiry date will be found in the bottom right-hand corner of your European Health Insurance card. If you do have an EHIT card, people say, well, do I need travel insurance? Well, the answer is yes, because an EHIT card is an addition to travel insurance. It's not a substitute. So it's still very important that you do take out travel insurance. Travel insurance. So although travel insurance is likely to be more expensive when you have a disability or a medical condition, it is absolutely essential that you do take it out. Otherwise, what you'll find is you're not actually covered. Falling ill on holiday can be really costly, and that's irrespective of whether you have a disability. But when you do have a disability, the cost can even be higher. Each person with a medical condition or disability will need to undergo medical screening once you ring and ask for a quote. You need to declare all your medical conditions when you're going through medical screening, because if you don't, you won't be covered. Although travel insurance, as I say, can be costly, it is far less so than if you fall in on holiday without it. Hospital and repatriation costs can be absolutely huge. But again, as with anything, shop around because quotes really can vary from company to company. If you're going abroad more than once a year, it's wise sometimes to think of an annual policy. Some companies won't offer this, but others will. So it's always worth asking if you're going, say, a couple of city breaks and a holiday in a year, then it could be cheaper to get an annual policy. And when going through medical screening for your travel insurance, I would advise you to use the term muscular dystrophy rather than Pompe disease. And finally, in terms of travel insurance, do online searches, have a look and see what's available. There's the British Insurance Brokers Association, BIBA, which is www.biba.org.uk. There's All Clear Travel, Stay Sure, Free Spirit Travel Insurance, Insure and Go, and Blue Badge Mobility Insurance. But again, if there's others you want to look at, there'll be plenty online. So just remember to have a good look and do your research. After booking your flight, it's important to contact the airline and tell them that you will need special assistance. And special assistance desks are located in all the airports. When you check in, you're likely to be asked for your wheelchair or scooter details again and instructions on how to disengage your wheelchair or your scooter. At this point, you should explain clearly if you need your scooter or wheelchair delivered back to the aircraft door at your destination. Some people will find that they would like to bring their scooter or wheelchair to the carousel. Now, for many people, that's really not possible because it means more transfers, which for many people is very hard anyway. And you've then got to go and rescue your wheelchair or scooter that's been flown around the carousel, and it could easily be damaged. So I always insist. I've had some very difficult conversations with cabin crew, but I always insist that it's brought back to the door of the aircraft on reaching our destination. So when you've checked in at the airport, you'll be needed to go to the airport assistants so that you can register with them and they can then help you with what you need. So whether that is help to get to the gate or assistance to get on the plane, and you will at that point be asked if you need an aisle wheelchair to help get you to your seat. Once you've done that, then it's security, but please be prepared. You will be likely to be asked to take out all your medical equipment from its storage bag and put it in one of the trays. And this is really a pain and it can be stressful, but if you know that's what you're going to expect, then at least you can factor that extra time into your journey through the airport. You will be expected to have a body search, but if you are unable to get out of your wheelchair or your scooter, you can be searched while being seated. So there are different options for boarding the aircraft, and sometimes that just varies from airport to airport. Sometimes you can be on an ambi lift, so you just literally ride your scooter or wheelchair onto the lift and it lifts you up and takes you to will eventually take you right to the front of the aircraft door. And then sometimes they have special chairs to take you up the steps of the aircraft. I've very rarely seen this in practice and I don't think it would be particularly comfortable, but I know it does happen. But it's always worth finding out exactly how you're going to be boarding and disembarking the aircraft. You also find that people in wheelchairs and scooters generally board first and are last to disembark. This is quite a good question here. Is there anything I can do to minimise damage to my wheelchair or scooter? Well, what you could do is you could write some written instructions to people to know how it operates, whether that's how to fold it, how to disassemble it, etc. And any removable parts from your wheelchair should be removed. They can be carried with you on the plane and they are not counted as baggage. So that's in addition to your luggage. And as soon as you reach your destination, check your wheelchair and scooter for damage, and if it is damaged, notify the airline immediately if there's a problem. Carrying medication on the plane. So essential medicines and liquids and dietary food are not limited to the usual 100ml hand luggage allowance. You will, however, need supporting evidence, such as a letter from your doctor or a copy of your prescription. And whatever you do, please ensure that everything is labelled. Getting to the toilet on the aircraft. As many of you will know, the toilets on most aircraft are absolutely tiny, and this makes it particularly difficult for passengers with mobility difficulties. You can always ask the cabin crew to close the curtain in the cabin to give you that bit of privacy, which is what's happened for us many times when my husband's had to help me on and off the toilet. If there is an onboard wheelchair, remember that flight attendants can push you through to the bathroom, but they are unable to assist you in transferring to the toilet. For short-haul flights, many people use the disabled toilet facilities when they leave the UK and then immediately as they arrive at their destination. But it is quite a long time, particularly when you're first off and last off the aircraft. But other people, and I'm guilty of this, tend to limit their fluid intake the day before their flight, but this really isn't ideal, and you should certainly rehydrate as soon as you get to your destination. Driving abroad on holiday. So taking your mobility car abroad. You can take your car abroad within the European Union and to Iceland, Norway, Switzerland and Liechtenstein. What you need to do is complete a VE 103 form, which is available from the RAC. You will need to do this at least 3 weeks before you intend to travel. You can also add RAC European breakdown cover at no extra cost when you request the VE 103 document. And also remember to take your certificate of motor insurance with you when you travel. For the latest information about travelling abroad, visit www.motability.co.uk. And also remember your blue badge, which is still valid in Europe for now. In terms of car hire companies, you could again Google these online, but a couple that come to mind are Hertz, HERTZ, and Europcar, EUROPCAR. Both do offer vehicles suitable for people with disabilities, but I would always be very careful that you state specifically your needs and what size boot you need to accommodate the scooter or wheelchair, and book in plenty of time. So in terms of the tips for hiring a car, always book it from the UK. You get these horrific horror stories about people not booking from the UK and they get charged a fortune when they're on holiday, and they often have these massive waiver fees, and you have to put up huge deposits. So be really, really careful. My advice would always be try and book it from the UK before you go on holiday. Make sure the vehicle can meet your needs, whether that's you as a passenger or a driver, and always ask for a quote and establish what exactly is and what isn't covered. For example, some companies will supply you a car full of petrol, and they will then expect the car to be full of petrol when you return it. If you don't return it full, they will charge you a fortune to fill it back up again, and they will deduct that from the cost of the hire. I would always book early and in plenty of time, and one good website full of tips is Martin Lewis's website, Tips for Renting Cars on Holiday, and that's www.moneysavingexpert.com. Cruising with a disability. Cruises are a really good choice for people who've got disabilities. And modern crew liners particularly are equipped with a comprehensive range of facilities to accommodate disabled guests. They've got specially adapted cabins, really good wheelchair access, and some ships also have got electrical hoists or lifts so that you can access at least one of the pools on board. It is important, like all holidays, to make sure that you choose the right ship that has the right facilities to suit your individual needs, because they can vary a lot, and whereas one ship might suit one person, another ship might be better suited to somebody else. Adapted cabins need to be booked well in advance, and often they don't have many adapted cabins, so again, book early and ensure that you've got a room that can meet your needs. So you need to research and plan as you would with any holiday to make sure that you have the right ship, that you've got the right cabin, a cabin, for example, that might be step-free, suitable for one person, but somebody else might be able to manage a little step. So it's just to make sure you've got the cabin that suits you, and also to think about when you dock in ports and go on shore excursions that you are able to disembark from the ship. You do get these horror stories of people arriving at particular ports, and for whatever reason, the ship doesn't have the right equipment to help get you on offshore. So then you're stuck on the ship and can't go and visit countries. So it's very, very important that you do all your research. Some useful websites for cruising: Cruise Critic, that's CRUISE Critic, CRITIC.co.uk, Cruisely.com, which is CRUZELY.com, and Limitless, LIMITLESS, travel.org/disabled/cruises. But lots of people I know with disabilities have been on cruise holidays and they wouldn't do anything else. They just think it's fabulous because the facilities are fantastic and it really is truly accessible for somebody in a wheelchair or a scooter. So help towards the cost of a holiday. For some people, holidays are phenomenally expensive and everybody deserves a holiday, but sadly not everybody is able to find the money for a breakaway. But thankfully there are organisations out there that specialise in providing subsidised holidays for disabled people and their families, or that allocate grants which you can apply for towards a holiday. There's a company called Revitalise. That's a national charity providing short breaks and holidays for disabled people and their carers, and that's www.revitalise.org.uk. And disability grants are available from www.disabilitygrants.org. Again, worth looking into that if that means that you will then be able to afford a holiday. So before you leave home to go on your holiday, the key thing is to make sure that all your equipment is fully charged, whether that's your scooter, your wheelchair, your ventilator. Make sure that it's maximum charge so that if anything goes wrong, then you've got some battery power on that equipment. Ensure you take your chargers with you, batteries and any adapters. Also, it's advisable to take an extension lead because if the hotel don't have one, then you could be stuck. Make sure all your equipment is labelled. I know that sounds really obvious, but it's amazing that you might get 3 or 4 people on a flight with a ventilator and they could all be in the same bag and you don't know which is which. So it's really, really important to label your equipment. Also, advisable to take hospital numbers with you just in case of an emergency. If you needed to contact the respiratory team or your metabolic consultant while you're away, then at least you've got the telephone numbers. And if you are flying, always make sure that you have your fit to fly assessment letter and that you know exactly where you are in terms of needing or not needing oxygen to fly. It's also worth taking a copy of your NHS prescription with you, just in case you should need more medication when you are away on holiday. And also, for all of us folks with Pompe, it's always good to have your Pompe card with you. If you use ventilation, have a ventilator card with you. And if you also have one, medic alert bracelet. That's really helpful because you just wear that either around your wrist or you can have a necklace, and that will say on mine, for example, it tells them that I use CPAP, ventilation, and that I have Pompe disease. And I also actually have an allergy to a drug. So all that information is on a medical bracelet, which I wear all the time. And if you were in an accident or were unwell or admitted to hospital, then paramedics will have to, by law, have to look at that. So they will then have all that information to hand. So it's about being prepared to make sure that if there was a problem, you have researched and prepared for it as much as possible, so that you can actually sit back, relax, and enjoy your holiday. Finally, I want to finish with this slide, and this is how your holiday can turn out once you've done all the research and planning, and hopefully you're having a really great time. This was taken on holiday in southern Spain, in Andalusia, a good few years ago now, and I hadn't been in the sea for, over 10 years. And they had what they call a sea chair. So I transferred from my scooter with the help of my family into this sea chair. And then these two guys pushed me in to the sea. And do you know what? It was absolutely wonderful to be in the sea. The feeling of the water on your body was just beautiful, and it was really, really warm, and the sun was shining. And I was saying to my daughter, who my family were swimming around me, and I said to my daughter, it's not all that bad, is it? You've got two hunks here taking you into the water. And I happened to say to one of the chaps, what part of Spain are you from? And he said, I'm from Cornwall. So he'd understand everything I'd said when I was telling my daughter what good-looking hunks they were. So sometimes life with a disability can be hard, but sometimes it can have its advantages as well. And I think a final note I would say to you is that with the right support and equipment, your holiday can be a success. And sometimes it's important to remember that we don't actually grow until we go outside our comfort zone. So whilst it might be quite daunting to take a big step and to start thinking about going on holiday again, it can be done as long as you research and you plan and minimise the chances of things going wrong. Then you can have a fabulous holiday. So that leaves me to wish you a happy holiday.